Can the 10,000 hours rule, Malcolm Gladwell's idea of talent is born from, doing something for 10,000 hours. If you do it for 10,000 hours, you're one of the best in the world at it. Does that apply to happiness? Absolutely. So the way our brains work is through neuroplasticity, just like the way our muscles work is, replenish and rest. The cycle of working out in a gym, where you lift something or exercise for your muscles to be under a little bit of stress, and then you build them again and again and again. That same rule applies to our brains. Okay, our brains basically work on neuroplasticity. So what you practice, they say that the neurons that fire together wire together. So if you constantly practice happiness, the neurons in your brain that are associated with that state that you call happiness will become strengthened. The networks between them will be better. So you will have access to them just like you have access to the muscles that you've exercised. The interesting difference between them, however, is that in your gym, whichever muscle you exercise grows, and what you don't exercise shrinks. That also applies, by the way, to neuroplasticity. What you use grows, what you don't shrinks. But if you go to the gym and squat every day, more and more and more weights, you will be pear-shaped, right? You'll just grow from your lower body, and you'll be very thin at your top. And the opposite is true. If you're constantly doing upper body exercises, you're going to look like a triangle. Okay. When, however, that work happens inside our brains, you don't see it physically. You can't visibly observe that certain neurons have changed. But those kinds of exercises are what we do with our life every day. So if you are constantly watching negative news, what are you really doing? Other than getting the information, the tiny bit of truth that is surrounded by so much, hype to keep you glued to the screen that's delivering the news, by watching it over and over and over, you're creating very strong neural networks that are capable of finding negativity. If you're constantly watching horror movies, you're strengthening your ability to feel afraid. Okay, if you're constantly in a complaint mode, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you're becoming really good at complaining. Okay, and because neuroplasticity works in that way, the idea of if I practice happiness over and over and over and over, I'll be really, really good at it is absolutely true. But it's also, if I don't practice unhappiness, I'll be really weak at it, and that's also true. How do you practice happiness? I tell people very straightforward answers about that. I say, try to find out the biggest reason for your unhappiness. In my case, being an engineer, a mathematician, and a business executive in my young years, my biggest issue was the illusion of control. I expected that I wanted to control everything in life. Okay, and that took a lot of effort and stress and a big toll on me, but I was constantly disappointed with my happiness equation because my expectation of control was never met. So events never met my expectations. And I worked on that. And it's a very, very systemic method. You decide that the biggest reason for your unhappiness is A or B or C, and start to study this, start to learn about this, and work on that one thing that is causing 80% of your unhappiness. Until you've done 21 days of practice behind it, it will become easier. And then go on and continue to practice until you've nailed it. Once 80% of your unhappiness is gone, because that reason for unhappiness is under control, the rest is quite easy. And it just happens through consistent practice of putting yourself first. When you start your morning, you need to have time in your calendar that basically says, this is time for me. This is time for me to find my happiness. This is time for me to become better at this game, at this sport that we call happiness.